Get out, move! Officer Mercer's voice sliced through her window like a blade looking for blood. His hand rested on his holster as he studied her. A 72-year-old black woman in a Mercedes, immediately suspicious in his eyes. "This your car, ma'am?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "Seems awful nice for someone from this neighborhood." "I've committed no violation," Justice Eleanor Grayson replied calmly. "May I ask why I'm being detained?" "Don't get smart with me," he snapped. "You people always think you know the law better than officers." Without warning, he yanked her door open, dragged her from the vehicle like contraband. Her glasses cracked against the pavement. He thought he was teaching another troublemaker respect. Instead, he'd assaulted the highest authority on constitutional law in America. Because she wasn't just any 72-year-old grandmother, she was Supreme Court Justice Eleanor Grayson. Now she sat in holding, quietly observant, her judicial mind cataloging every violation while her bruised body ached. What will happen when the station discovers who they've imprisoned behind their bars? How will Officer Mercer and Chief Rawlings respond when they learn whose rights they've trampled? Will their desperate pleas for discretion save their careers, or the department? And what justice awaits a system that allowed this to happen in the first place? Let this story of power, prejudice, and ultimate justice unfold. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the tree-lined streets of Highland Park as Justice Eleanor Grayson drove her midnight blue Mercedes sedan toward home. After 30 years on the federal bench, the last 8 on the Supreme Court, she still preferred to drive herself when possible, a small rebellion against the constant security and protocol that defined her professional life. The air held the earthy richness of recent rain, amplified by her partially open window. Eleanor had spent the morning visiting her sister in the neighboring county, a rare personal day between the crushing weight of landmark cases awaiting her return to Washington. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in its characteristic neat bun, her posture as straight as it had been during her first arguments before the court decades ago. At 72, Justice Grayson carried herself with the dignified authority that had made her a legal legend, first as a civil rights attorney, then federal prosecutor, circuit court judge, and finally, the third black woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court. The radio played classical music softly as she mentally prepared notes for her upcoming dissenting opinion in the Watkins voting rights case. Her thoughts were interrupted by flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Eleanor checked her speedometer, 3 miles under the limit, and carefully signaled before pulling to the curb. She'd been driving this route for years without incident. Officer Darren Mercer of the Highland Park Police Department approached with a swagger that Eleanor had seen countless times in her courtroom, the walk of unearned authority. At 34, he carried himself with the cocky assurance of a man who'd never faced consequences for his actions. His mirrored sunglasses masked his eyes, but his tight-lipped expression said everything about his mood. Eleanor noticed his hand already resting on his holster as he approached, an unnecessary posture for a routine traffic stop involving an elderly woman. This immediate defensive stance triggered her professional instincts. Something wasn't right. "Good afternoon, officer," Eleanor said politely, her hands visible on the steering wheel as she'd always advised her own children and grandchildren. "Have I done something wrong?" Mercer's gaze swept over her expensive vehicle, then her face, his assessment quick and prejudiced. "License and registration," he demanded, skipping any professional greeting. As Eleanor reached slowly for her purse, she noticed Officer Mercer tense further. In that moment, she realized this wasn't about traffic laws at all. This was about a black woman driving an expensive car in what had once been an exclusively white neighborhood. The realization settled in her stomach like cold lead. The tension thickened as Eleanor carefully extracted her license from her wallet. "My registration is in the glove compartment," she said evenly, maintaining eye contact with Officer Mercer. "I'm going to reach for it now." Mercer didn't acknowledge her statement, his expression hardening as he examined her driver's license. Something shifted in his demeanor, a tightening around his eyes, a slight curl of his lip. Eleanor Grayson, he read aloud, deliberately dropping her title. This address isn't in this neighborhood. I was visiting my sister, Eleanor replied. She lives 3 blocks from here. Mercer's radio crackled with dispatcher traffic about a stolen Mercedes reported earlier that week. Though the description mentioned a newer model SUV, not her sedan, Eleanor watched his posture change, witnessed the moment he decided what narrative he would construct. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am, he ordered suddenly, his hand moving to his holster again. Officer, there seems to be some confusion. My car wasn't... I said step out of the vehicle. Mercer's voice rose sharply. Now. Eleanor felt a chill race through her body. Decades of legal experience told her this situation was deteriorating rapidly. Officer Mercer, she said, reading his nameplate, I'd like to speak with your supervisor. His face flushed. So you can read my name. Good for you. Out. Now. Eleanor carefully unbuckled her seatbelt, her movements deliberate. I believe I'm being profiled, Officer Mercer. I've committed no violation. Another one who knows the law better than cops, he sneered. Let's go. He stepped back, hand still on his weapon, watching her with naked contempt. Officer Vaughn, Mercer's younger partner, approached from their cruiser. Everything okay, Darren? His eyes darted nervously between his partner and Eleanor. Just another entitled one thinking the rules don't apply, Mercer replied. Run the VIN. I'm betting this car isn't hers. Eleanor stood beside her vehicle, dignity intact despite the humiliation building around her. She'd spent a lifetime fighting such assumptions, but never expected to face them so nakedly at this stage of her career. I am Justice Eleanor Grayson of the United States Supreme Court, she stated calmly, her voice carrying the weight of her office. This vehicle is registered in my name. You can verify my identity with... The back of Mercer's hand connected with her cheek before she could finish. The blow, shocking in its suddenness, sent Eleanor staggering against her car door, her glasses clattered to the pavement. Playing dress-up now? Mercer snarled. Impersonating a federal official is a felony. Officer Vaughn froze, his young face draining of color. Darren, wait. But Mercer was already pulling Eleanor's hands behind her back, the handcuffs biting into her thin wrists. Shut up, Vaughn. She's resisting. Eleanor hadn't moved a muscle. The absurdity of the claim would have been laughable if the situation weren't so dangerous. Blood trickled from her split lip as Mercer shoved her against the hood. My identification is in my wallet, Eleanor said through gritted teeth, pain radiating from her wrists. My judicial credentials are there as well. Save it for processing, Mercer growled, roughly searching her pockets. A passerby had stopped, phone raised, recording the scene. Hey, that's an old lady. What are you doing? Police business, Mercer shouted. Move along. Eleanor caught the witness's eye. Please continue recording, she called out, her judicial voice carrying authority despite her compromised position. This is an unlawful detention. Mercer yanked her upright, his baton suddenly in his hand. That's it. You're going to learn respect. The baton struck Eleanor's shoulder with stunning force, sending white-hot pain through her body. She collapsed to her knees, vision blurring, ears ringing with the shocked cries of growing spectators. She's not resisting, someone shouted from the gathering crowd. Eleanor felt herself being dragged to the patrol car, her shoulder screaming in protest. Through the haze of pain, her legal mind remained razor-sharp. Officer Vaughn, she managed, addressing the younger officer, you are witnessing federal civil rights violations. Vaughn's conflicted expression betrayed his inner turmoil, but he made no move to intervene as Mercer shoved Eleanor into the back seat. Federal rights, Mercer mimicked mockingly. Let's see those rights when you're sitting in a cell, Grandma." The Highland Park police station smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Eleanor sat perfectly straight on the metal bench in the holding cell, ignoring the throbbing pain in her shoulder and wrists. Her normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, her silk blouse torn at the sleeve, a smear of blood on her collar, her silver-streaked hair falling loose from its customary bun. Yet her eyes remained clear and penetrating, taking in every detail of her surroundings with the same analytical precision she applied to complex constitutional questions. Officer Mercer had performed a theatrical show of processing her. Fingerprints pressed harshly onto cards, mugshots taken while he made snide comments about cleaning up the streets. He'd confiscated her purse, refusing to check her identification despite her repeated, calm requests. When she'd mentioned her constitutional right to a phone call, he'd laughed. "Constitution doesn't apply to car thieves," he'd said, slamming the cell door. That had been 2 hours ago. Eleanor had been carefully counting each minute, each procedural violation, each instance of mistreatment. The young desk sergeant occasionally glanced her way with growing unease, clearly sensing something wasn't right about detaining a well-spoken elderly woman without charges. "Officer," Eleanor called out, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded the highest court in the land. "I have not been informed of any charges against me. I have not been permitted my phone call, my rights under Miranda have been violated, and I have been physically assaulted by Officer Mercer. I would like to speak with the commanding officer immediately." The desk sergeant approached cautiously. "Ma'am, Officer Mercer is filing his report. You'll have to wait." "Sergeant Williams," Eleanor said, reading his nameplate. "I am Justice Eleanor Grayson of the United States Supreme Court. You can verify this with one phone call to the Supreme Court Marshal's office or to my clerk. I suggest you make that call now." Williams froze, his expression cycling through disbelief, uncertainty, and then dawning horror. "You're claiming to be a Supreme Court justice?" "I'm not claiming anything. I'm stating a fact. My judicial credentials are in my wallet, which Officer Mercer confiscated. My court security detail will have already noted my absence and begun searching for me. I suggest you contact Chief Justice Harrington immediately before this situation deteriorates further." The sergeant's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the phone. 20 minutes later, the station erupted into frantic activity. Chief Raymond Rawlings burst through the door, face ashen, followed by a panicked-looking Officer Mercer. "Open the cell!" Rawlings barked. "Now!" As the door swung open, Eleanor remained seated, her gaze level and unflinching. "Chief Rawlings, I presume?" "Justice Grayson, there's been a terrible misunderstanding," Rawlings stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "We had no idea—" "No, Chief, there was no misunderstanding," Eleanor interrupted, her voice ice cold. "What occurred today was a deliberate series of civil rights violations predicated on racial bias. Officer Mercer pulled me over without cause, refused to examine my identification, physically assaulted me, and falsely imprisoned me. These actions were witnessed by Officer Vaughn and at least 7 civilians, one of whom recorded the encounter." Mercer's face had drained of color. "Chief, she was resisting." "Be silent," Rawlings hissed at him before turning back to Eleanor. "Justice Grayson, please accept my deepest apologies. We will, of course, release you immediately and provide any medical attention you require. I assure you, Officer Mercer will be disciplined appropriately." Eleanor stood slowly, wincing at the pain in her shoulder but refusing to show weakness. "Chief Rawlings, I do not accept your apology, nor will this matter be resolved with mere disciplinary action. What happened today is symptomatic of systemic issues within your department. I have spent my career defending constitutional principles, and I will not allow this violation to be buried or minimized." She stepped out of the cell, standing eye to eye with Rawlings despite her modest height. I will be filing formal charges against Officer Mercer and your department. I will also be requesting a Department of Justice investigation into the patterns and practices of the Highland Park Police." Rawlings paled further. "Justice Grayson, perhaps we could discuss this privately. There will be nothing private about this matter, Chief. The Constitution operates in the light, not in backroom deals." Eleanor straightened her torn sleeve. "Now, I require my belongings, immediate medical attention, and contact with my staff. And I suggest you begin preparing your department's records for federal scrutiny." As Chief Rawlings scrambled to comply, Eleanor caught Officer Mercer's eye. The hate and fear she saw there confirmed what she already knew. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about a system that had protected men like him for far too long. The Supreme Court Marshall's security detail arrived with almost military precision. Black SUVs surrounding the police station while federal agents in dark suits swept through the building. Eleanor sat in Chief Rawlings' office, an ice pack on her shoulder, speaking quietly into a secure phone with the Chief Justice. "Yes, Jonathan, I intend to pursue this fully," she said, watching through the glass as Officer Mercer was escorted to an interview room. "This isn't about me personally. What happened today happens to countless citizens without my resources or platform." The emergency room doctor had documented her injuries: a severe contusion on her shoulder, lacerations on her wrists from the over-tightened handcuffs, facial bruising, and a split lip. Every injury photographed, every medical report copied in triplicate. Eleanor had insisted on it, knowing evidence would be crucial. Within hours, the story had exploded across national media. Camera crews surrounded the station. The Highland Park mayor had already called 3 times, each message more desperate than the last. The governor had issued a statement expressing deep concern, and the Attorney General had personally called to inform Eleanor that a Civil Rights Division investigation was being launched immediately. Chief Rawlings returned to his office, ashen-faced after consulting with the department's attorney. "Justice Grayson, I want to personally assure you that Officer Mercer has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We're prepared to offer—" "I'm not interested in offers, Chief," Eleanor interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm interested in justice, and not just for myself." "With all due respect, Justice Grayson," Rawlings said, lowering his voice, "pursuing this aggressively could damage public trust in law enforcement." Eleanor's gaze hardened. "Public trust is earned through accountability, Chief Rawlings, something your department appears to have avoided for quite some time." She slid a folder across the desk, a preliminary report her clerks had assembled in record time. Statistics on Highland Park Police Department arrests, uses of force, and civilian complaints broken down by race. The numbers told a devastating story. "How did you get these so quickly?" Rawlings asked, his face paling further as he scanned the documents. "I'm a Supreme Court Justice, Chief. I have resources. And this," she tapped the folder, "is just the beginning. My team is already reviewing every civil rights complaint filed against your department in the past decade." As Eleanor rose to leave with her security detail, Rawlings made one final plea. "Justice Grayson, surely we can resolve this without—" "Without what, Chief? Without exposing the truth? That's not how justice works." She paused at the door. "And justice is coming to Highland Park." 3 weeks after the incident, Eleanor sat in her chambers in Washington, reviewing the latest findings from her legal team. The DOJ investigation had uncovered a pattern of discriminatory practices within the Highland Park Police Department spanning more than 15 years. False arrests, excessive force, and internal cover-ups, all disproportionately targeting Black and Latino residents. Her phone buzzed with a text from her lead investigator. "Security footage from station mysteriously corrupted. Working on recovery." Eleanor wasn't surprised. Evidence had been disappearing since the investigation began. body camera footage with technical malfunctions, witness statements recanted after unexplained visits from police union representatives, internal affairs files reportedly misfiled. The intimidation had begun subtly. Patrol cars parked outside her sister's home, anonymous calls to Eleanor's private line, veiled threats on social media targeting her clerks. When those tactics failed to deter her, the efforts became more brazen. "Justice Grayson," her security chief said, entering after a sharp knock. "We've detected another intrusion attempt on your personal devices. The FBI believes it originated from within the Highland Park Municipal Network." Eleanor nodded calmly. "Tell them to let it happen next time. We need evidence of coordination." "There's more," he continued gravely. "Officer Vaughn has agreed to testify." This was the breakthrough they needed. The young officer had witnessed everything, not just Eleanor's assault, but the subsequent cover-up attempts orchestrated by Chief Rawlings and the department's senior leadership. "He'll need protection," Eleanor said. "Arrange it immediately." That evening, as Eleanor worked late in her office, her secure line rang. "Justice Grayson," she answered. "You should reconsider your path," a disguised voice responded. "Even Supreme Court justices aren't untouchable. Accidents happen." Eleanor activated the call tracing protocol with a single button press. "Is that a threat?" she asked calmly. "It's a reality check, Your Honor. This goes higher than you think. The department has friends, powerful friends who don't appreciate federal overreach." "And who might those friends be?" Eleanor asked, buying time for the trace. "People who understand that some neighborhoods need special policing. People who know the value of officers like Mercer. Drop the investigation. For your family's sake." The line went dead. Eleanor's security chief burst in seconds later. "We got a partial trace. Burner phone, but the tower location—" "Let me guess," Eleanor interrupted. "Near the Highland Park station." He nodded grimly. Eleanor turned to the window, gazing out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the night sky. The threat confirmed what she'd suspected. The corruption wasn't isolated to a few officers. It was systemic, protected by power, possibly reaching into city government and beyond. She picked up her secure phone again. "Get me the Attorney General. It's time to expand the investigation." The intimidation would only get worse, but Eleanor Grayson hadn't become the first black female Chief Justice of the minority bloc by backing down from a fight. The rain fell in sheets across Washington as Eleanor left the courthouse under heavy security. 6 months into the Highland Park investigation, the case had grown far beyond one traffic stop. The DOJ had uncovered a web of corruption connecting the police department to City Hall, wealthy developers, and even federal judicial nominees. Eleanor slid into the armored SUV, reviewing Officer Vaughn's latest testimony on her tablet. The young officer had become their star witness, detailing how he'd been trained to target minority drivers in affluent neighborhoods, a practice euphemistically called community standard enforcement. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, windshield wipers fighting the downpour. Eleanor's security detail had doubled after ballistics experts confirmed that the stray bullet that shattered her home office window last week had been fired from a police-issue weapon. "New route today, Justice Grayson," her lead agent explained. "We've detected unusual surveillance activity on your normal—" The explosion ripped through the intersection ahead, sending a parked car cartwheeling through the air. Their driver swerved violently, the SUV mounting the curb. "IED!" the agent shouted, throwing himself across Eleanor as the second explosion erupted directly beneath their vehicle. The world tumbled violently, metal shrieking against concrete as the SUV rolled. Eleanor felt a sharp pain in her side, warm blood soaking through her jacket. Glass rained down as agents dragged her from the wreckage, returning fire against unseen assailants. "Justice down! Justice down!" she heard someone shout into a radio as they pulled her behind a concrete barrier. Sirens wailed in the distance. "Stay with me, Justice Grayson," her lead agent urged, applying pressure to her wound. "Help is coming." Eleanor gripped his arm. "My briefcase," she gasped. "Secure it." "Ma'am, we need to—" "The evidence," she insisted. "Highland Park financials. Proof of the conspiracy." Understanding dawned in his eyes. This wasn't a random attack. It was a desperate attempt to silence her and destroy evidence before the grand jury convened tomorrow. Through pain-blurred vision, Eleanor saw her security team retrieving the armored briefcase from the smoking vehicle. Their attackers had fled, but the message was clear. The corrupt system she was fighting would rather see a Supreme Court justice dead than exposed. As medics loaded her into an ambulance, Eleanor refused pain medication, insisting on remaining conscious. "Call the Attorney General," she told her agent, "and get those files to my clerk. They'll move against Vaughn next." Despite the blood seeping through her bandages, Eleanor's resolve remained unshaken. The attempt on her life had only confirmed what she already knew. She was close to the truth, too close for her enemies to allow her to continue. The grand jury room fell silent as the security footage played. On the screen, Officer Mercer dragged a handcuffed Eleanor Grayson from his patrol car, her face bloodied, then shoved her against the station wall when she stumbled. "Turn it off," the lead prosecutor said quietly. The federal grand jury members looked shell-shocked. This footage was supposedly corrupted beyond recovery according to Highland Park PD. Fortunately, Justice Grayson's team had technical resources they didn't anticipate. Eleanor sat at the witness table, her left arm in a sling from the assassination attempt 3 weeks earlier. 4 broken ribs, a lacerated spleen, and a concussion hadn't prevented her from personally presenting evidence today. Her security detail lined the walls of the room, a necessity after 2 more attempts on her life. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eleanor addressed the grand jury, her voice steady despite her injuries. "What you've witnessed today goes far beyond one traffic stop or one officer's misconduct. The evidence shows a deliberate pattern of civil rights violations spanning 2 decades, protected by a network of corruption reaching the highest levels of Highland Park government." She gestured to the stack of documents before her. "These financial records reveal that Highland Park's selective enforcement practices were designed to drive minority homeowners from certain neighborhoods, clearing the way for development projects benefiting Mayor Thornton and Police Commissioner Wexler. Officer Mercer wasn't a rogue officer. He was their instrument." The door burst open. "We have Vaughn," an FBI agent announced, his expression grim. "He's alive, but they got to him. Multiple stab wounds staged as a suicide attempt." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "Is he stable?" "Yes, ma'am. Under federal protection now." She nodded, turning back to the stunned grand jury. This is what happens when systems of power are challenged. But today, we have an opportunity to hold that system accountable. For the next hour, Eleanor methodically presented the evidence her team had gathered. Falsified police reports, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and the money trail connecting it all. She described her own assault with clinical precision, detaching herself from the trauma to focus on facts and constitutional principles. "The corruption in Highland Park didn't begin with my arrest," she concluded. "But with your courage it can end there. 33 citizens have died in Highland Park police custody over the past decade. Hundreds more have had their rights violated. I was fortunate to have resources and position that most victims lack. Now I'm asking you to be their voice." The grand jury's deliberations were the shortest in the district's history. By nightfall, indictments had been issued for Officer Mercer, Chief Rawlins, Commissioner Wexler, Mayor Thornton, and 17 other officials. As Eleanor watched FBI agents lead the handcuffed police leadership from their station, she thought of all the unnamed victims who had suffered without recourse. For them, this wasn't just about legal victory. It was about restoring faith that justice could truly be blind. 1 year later, Eleanor Grayson stood at the podium in Highland Park's community center, facing a packed room of residents. Behind her sat the newly appointed police chief, a reformer selected by a community oversight committee, and the interim mayor who had replaced the now imprisoned Thornton. "Today marks not an ending, but a beginning," Eleanor said, her voice carrying to the back of the room. "The consent decree signed yesterday between Highland Park and the Department of Justice represents a commitment to constitutional policing, one that will be monitored and enforced for years to come." The federal prosecution had resulted in 21 convictions. Officer Mercer had received 15 years for civil rights violations, assault, and conspiracy charges. Chief Rawlings and Commissioner Wexler had received 12 years each. The mayor and several council members were serving 8 to 10 years for their roles in the corruption scheme. But legal punishment alone cannot heal a community's wounds, Eleanor continued. True justice requires institutional change and commitment to equal protection under law. She unveiled the cornerstone of that change: a new civilian oversight board with real enforcement power, a complete overhaul of police training and procedures, and a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to address past abuses. Officer Vaughn, who had survived the attempt on his life to testify against his former colleagues, sat in the front row, now working as a community liaison officer. "What happened to me was not unique," Eleanor concluded. "The only unique aspect was that I had the position and resources to fight back. Today, we ensure that every citizen of Highland Park, regardless of race or resources, has that same opportunity for justice." As the room rose in a standing ovation, Eleanor thought of that day on the roadside, a moment of injustice that had triggered a movement for change. Sometimes, she reflected, justice required more than legal arguments. Sometimes it required standing in the path of corruption and refusing to step aside regardless of the cost.